Hello.
Good morning, folks.
Happy Thursday. Josh, those glasses are throwing me for a loop.
I'll take them off so we can discuss if you want.
Well, these face filters are getting really realistic.
Are they prescription glasses? Are they just fun glasses? Are they blue blocking?
They're just sunglasses that I pop the things off to feel like included with people who wear glasses. I don't feel like I need to have a prescription to wear glasses.
Are you jealous?
Yeah.
I wish I had poor eyesight.
I will say the one time I like having glasses is when I'm riding a bike or something like that and all the wind's blowing. I'm thinking I got built-in windscreens right here, right in front of each eye. That's the only time I like them.
Whenever I'm working on something and like something flies up and hits my glasses, I'm like, oh geez, like I guess I should be wearing safety glasses, but it's like I don't even think about it. Sometimes when I'm not wearing my glasses, I feel like my eyes are like exposed.
Not safe out there without glasses. Are we waiting for anybody else? Is there any other
I think
thing?
we're close enough to a quorum that we can at least kick a little bit of this thing off. For anybody that's not aware, there is a TOB election coming up. So I think nomination period is open. The link is over in our meeting notes. So if you're interested, please go over there and fill that out. And the other little bit of administrative is that the FreeBSD working group is up for TOB vote right now. So for anybody here that's on the TOB and hasn't voted on that yet, I don't know how many people in here that will qualify, but that is out there right now. So something to be aware of. Otherwise, I think the reason we have all gathered here today is to talk about allowing registries to reject the missing subject and whatnot. So shall we dive into that one?
We should go backwards from the conversation. I was just reading your message, Brandon, from our reference group, or yeah, the reference type working group that was resurrected. You want to go back to your last comment, or?
Yeah, you've got a lot there in terms of ideas and thoughts and ways to change things. I just want to make sure that we're staying focused on the overall goal, which is, I think, to work through the issue 459 of whether or not registry should be allowed to reject a manifest if the subject doesn't exist.
I mean, yeah, I tried to explain that in my initial comment, that the goal is to negate needing that change so that we can keep it as a must, or whether or not it's like, whether I think like, oh, may or should be better. It doesn't matter if it doesn't matter. Like if we keep it as a must, then it's not a big deal. So from my perspective, the reason why it addresses that issue is because if the registries don't need to index that data because the manifest is created by the client, then we can get rid of some of that discussion. So we could keep it as must and just go back and update the registries to not check the subject. So if anything, I'm trying to go along with what you're requesting. It's just more trying to figure out how to get that in a way that's both 1.1 compliant and doesn't break anything that's there now.
So
Can I try to rephrase that for my own clarification? Is that basically the answer is, instead of making it a must and the server lost my train of thought. Basically, the registry just doesn't have to parse or understand that manifest at all. If the client's responsible for writing it, the registry can just accept it, store it, do nothing with it, and doesn't know and doesn't care, and wouldn't be responsible for looking.
Yeah,
Whether
so
anything in that manifest exists or doesn't doesn't
yeah.
care.
So I mean, it's basically like what the fallback is, assuming that the registries are doing like not caring. The concern with that position before is that, like, well, some registries do want to support refers, and the idea that, like, well, if you want to support refers for some registries, like, just don't support refers and then you'll support refers, is kind of like the discussion before, like, oh, just ignore it and then it will be supported through the fallback. So basically taking that and saying, well, instead of just giving that logic of, hey, just don't support it and then it will just get supported through the fallback, allowing registries to understand it and be able to provide all of the headers and optimizations that 1.1 has, but still be able to let the client create the content. And then, yes, by having the client create the content, the registry does not need to index the subject, or at least does not need to index it in a way that would break the existing data model, or kind of the discussion we were having before, which my understanding is, yeah, I was trying to fit that into the way the indexing was working before. It was either really inefficient or kind of a breaking change for the implementation, like the distribution/distribution implementation.
I don't know how much. I don't think we can say that it's a breaking change if it only breaks from one implementation. Every implementation has its own. I mean, or sorry, you said specifically that it would be really hard and slow to do, I think, for that, right? Like,
yeah, I'm saying is it would either be a breaking change or just a non-optimal change.
Yeah.
And that's specifically for trying to understand and generate the manifest. So yeah, I understand the argument. It's like, okay, well, just don't. But then we get stuck in this position where I'm a registry. I want to support refers. I want to support, setting all the headers and optimizations and whatever queryability or whatever. And I can't, because I can't do it efficiently. So it's more about just being able to support that efficiently. And I think it'll be easier to convince the registries that are currently failing on the subject to allow that, basically to keep that must in there. So I guess from the perspective of solving that issue, it's more like we can just close that issue if we have a better solution for it.
Yeah, I think the issue is there's some confusion, I think, in when 1.1 is cut, whatever 1.1 says. Registries aren't broken the day that 1.1 comes out. They're just not 1.1 compliant, which is a fine state to be in. There will be thousands of implementations and installations of Quay and distribution and everything, and Harbor and everything everywhere, that never upgrade, that will never be 1.1 compliant, and that's fine. Like, but I think it's worth moving forward in the best moving forward and making progress without having to worry too much about installations that will never support it, or might take longer to support it, or might not support it the day that it comes out. I don't think anything will support it the day it comes out, right? Or maybe by now certain, maybe Zot does or something, but I don't know of any others that support it in the current, like, snapshot of the spec at this point in time. I don't think anything will support it on day one. It will take months and possibly years and possibly never before everything.
That's another discussion we should talk about in terms of like time frame, in terms of like, do we cut a final release before registries have actually pushed this out into production? I have some concerns about that. Like, I understand the logic behind it and the fears around the because of the whole 999 thing, but I also have concerns the other way, which is, hey, OCI has never done it in that order. Like, registries implemented stuff, proved that it works, and then we did a release after that. Not the
I think
hey, we released it, nobody's actually done it, and now it's like, good luck. Hopefully you got it right.
No, I think we've had that discussion before, and it was, I think, for months, a bit of a chicken and egg problem. Like, no one's going to adopt the spec until it's a spec, and no one's going to codify the spec until it's implemented, at least twice or something. By now, I think at least a couple registry implementations do mainly support the spec as it is currently RC. They don't advertise it. I think ECR is one of these. If Michael Brown is here, he can correct me or throw tomatoes at me if I'm saying stuff that's incorrect. But
yeah, we haven't released anything, but yes, we have it working.
So the implementation is there, but they're not sort of, blogging about it, advertising it, because if the spec changed again tomorrow, as we're thinking about doing, like, they wouldn't want to say, oh, it was actually 1.1 RC5 compliant, but not RC6 or 1.1 real.
Yeah.
So I get that. Like, there is a chicken and egg problem. There is a bit of that, but I think we've solved it by virtue of waiting for 2 years. A couple of registries basically support 1.1 today, under the radar, and the day that it comes out, there may be small changes. I don't know exactly what the status is on ECR, or I think Zot, but I wouldn't let that block 1.1 because some things do implement it today, unless we change it again, in which case it will probably reset the clock, and months later they will finally support 1.1 RC6.
Azure might be another example of a registry that may already have support public. Not sure.
Yeah, I think they've all, a few registries have like quietly implemented it, but don't want to yell too loudly about it in case OCI changes their minds again.
I think also that argument is not, like you said, OCI could never worked in this way. I think that it won't ever work that way again. Like, Microsoft did the whole Aorus thing, and then, right, was told, oh, go to OCI with this and go to the working group, and then we ended up not doing a lot of that stuff. So I don't see how you could prove something out so much at one company or with one tool and then have the OCI just coalesce around it.
I mean, I think we've gotten as close to general broad agreement as we have ever gotten, and I think are likely to ever get, by virtue of talking about it weekly for 2 years. People have mostly stopped moving and have started circling around a smaller and smaller and smaller set of disagreements until now we're at, I think this is the last one. I thought the last 3 were the last ones. Yeah, I'm not sure that we're going to get any closer to agreement than where we are right now. Does anyone disagree? I'd love to hear other people think differently.
I agree. I think looking back, we're not in a trailing situation anymore going forward. We had that in the past because Docker already assisted and was doing its thing. I don't think we're going to be in that situation in the future.
I think I mentioned this to Brandon that from my perspective, until we get To me, the biggest argument against or for a change is that, you know, it's proven in production, and, you know, if there's users for something and then we go and say, hey, like, we're going to change this, and somebody says, hey, I'm using this in production and, you know, it's working, or you're going to break me, then to me, that's a much more compelling argument for any to do or not to do anything.
So let me just say this. I'm using this in production today. All of my images go out with refers attached to them. The Harbor Registry has this support in production today. Their current releases have RC candidates in there. So this is out there. And we are past the point of giving guidance that can be taken without looking retroactively at people that have already been doing stuff with it.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I'm saying, like, any changes we make, everything is, at this point, it's optional, and everything should continue to work. Like, I just want to make that clear, that I tried to make that clear, and everything that I'm suggesting here is to fill in those edge or those cases where registries aren't working today. But for the cases that are working today, like, none of those should break.
Yeah, that's the point of the fallback tag scheme, right? We spent a lot of time and ink and blood and sweat and tears coming up with the fallback tag scheme, so that 1.0 compliant registries that aren't 1.1 compliant can still be used in, ideally, a like seamless way. Like, if you are pushing with cosign, you don't know that the registry you're pushing to doesn't support refers. I think that's the escape hatch we designed for registries that haven't yet or may never update to 1.1 conformance or compliance. I think giving them another one that means giving 1.0 registries an escape hatch that lets them, you know, put the 1.1 badge up without doing anything, you know, sort of weakens the entire point of all of this work. Like, the point of it is that now you can do better. If we make it if we weaken all the musts to shoulds or mays, then every registry currently in existence becomes 1.1 compliant because it only may do the things we want. But that pushes a lot of complexity onto clients and future implementers, because they don't know what the server they're talking to must do, right? They only know what it may do, and then there's a lot more complexity there. All for the benefit of 1.0 compliant registries to seamlessly upgrade to be 1.1 compliant registries, which I don't think is worth that. I'll let Brandon go.
Yeah, I want to dig into some of the proposal then, because it sounds like we're at least past the must versus should debate, and now we're into, okay, we've got a scenario here. We think that if we add some of this functionality, that we need to add this functionality so that registries can implement some of the stuff they want to implement. And then regardless of which way that goes, I think we're past at least the must versus should, which is something that I think we're in a good place at that point then. So I wanted to dig into the comment in there when you're talking about that we need to add a new put API and that we need to implement this because, and just kind of reading back here, not every registry or not every client implemented the fallback. And so because not every client implemented the fallback, confusing whether the registry supports it or not, that we need a third option for how we're managing this stuff. And I'm not quite sure I follow the logic there, because if a client hadn't implemented the fallback, what's to say a client's going to implement the third method of doing this? That doesn't even exist yet. Pretty much every client out there hasn't implemented what you're describing so far because it doesn't exist yet.
I mean, the expectation is that clients will need to explicitly implement this stuff. Like, if we add another option, like,
couldn't we say the clients must implement the fallback though?
We do say clients must implement the fallback. But does every client implement the fallback?
How does this negate the concern there that there are clients out there that don't implement the fallback? Guess that's where I'm going.
I don't think it negates the concern. It just gives a path forward for clients that basically, it gives stronger language for like a client implement the fallback, because it's not just for 1.0 registries, but it's also for 1.1 registries. It's the same logic. So right now it seems that at least some of the clients are specifically targeting these 1.1 registries. And there's an assumption that maybe some features are missing out if it goes back to the fallback. But I don't think that's the case. As I said before, yeah, I think the fallback is well done, and that's why I'm saying the fallback method should just be a first class method in 1.0 and 1.1. And the difference between the two is very, very small.
It's small, but it is a third code path.
It's
Right.
yeah, it's more like it's a first class code path, and it's just one fallback between the put to /refers or /manifest at the end. But otherwise it's the same.
I didn't mean third class. I was just thinking there's a method you go through by just doing the refers API and the registry response back that's there. There's a second method where you don't get the response that's there, and so you do the fallback. And now we got a third scenario clients need to worry about, which is, you didn't get the response that you were hoping for, but you did get this other response that told you need to do this other thing. And so now you have this third method you need to implement.
Well, it's limiting what we would call fallback in the first place, because basically what we call the fallback today, we wouldn't call it a fallback. It's just supporting the client side generation of the refers manifest. The fallback is literally put /refers 405 whatever put /manifest. Like that's the limit of the fallback. So basically it just takes that fallback section and makes it I say first class, but it's basically just a 1.1 section defining the behavior. And then the fallback for 1.0 is just a very small, you did this put here, doesn't work, do the put there. Or it's not going to work, just do the put here and there, and you lose out on conditional HTTP or whatever, most likely when you do that. But it's much more scoped.
Yeah, I think just hearing you describe it, it sounds more complex to have two layers of fallback. Like in a perfectly implemented, every May is implemented world, you wouldn't have, the client would just push one thing and it would work, and they would get a signal that it worked. But if not, they get this signal that they need to go down path B. And if they get the right sort of information from path B that says it's not going to index that, it needs to fall back to just pushing a tag. It feels very complex. These layers of fallback seem very complex and hard to express in a spec in a way that each client would know exactly what to do at each step in the branch. Maybe I'm thinking about it too much, but even just like hearing you describe it was like fallbacks upon fallback. It feels. And
well, I guess the point is that we don't want to call it a fallback
to
anymore. It's just do I need to push? It's just I push the subject. Do I need to push the index as well? And then when you push the index, that's where the fallback is. The fallback to 1.0.
Yeah, I guess I'll go with that.
How confident are we that people that didn't implement the fallback before are going to implement this alternate push method correctly, and not just say, well, I was trying to push this manifest, let me make an index that has this manifest and ship it, and not check to see whether or not there was content already there they needed to retain and overwrite all the other refers that were already there.
Yeah, is a registry, so we already have implementations that support the ideal workflow, and a lot of registries that implement the 1.0 workflow. I guess my understanding of Brandon's question is, how many registries do we expect to not implement the full workflow, but do something and only land halfway? It sounds like this might be for distribution, who has a difficult, for some reason, a difficult efficiency issue with the indexing on the full workflow. Is that I'm having trouble understanding why I would implement the middle flow if I already have the first one and would like the third one. Why would I do the second one?
I mean, I tried to give the reasons in the for it. I mean, I think there's, from my perspective, like I think for the actual management of the subjects or the actual refer manifest, I think there's advantages there. Now I realize we don't all agree on that, because some folks say, hey, what if I don't want a client to remove a subject manifest, but then the other side is, hey, we want clients to be able to do that. And not every registry is going to support the delete flow, or even an expectation that clients are going to be cleaning up after themselves. If you were, say, pushing an updated signature, pushing any sort of update, having that expectation that the clients are going to go in and clean up the previous versions of that. So
yeah, I think that goes also to I remember talking a lot about garbage collection and how we didn't want to fall down the rabbit hole of specifying garbage collection behaviors. I think that is a thing the registry could be responsible for, having a policy, having a configuration, a non-OCI specified garbage collection configuration of like any untagged manifests older than 4 days or 4 months or 4 years, delete them and remove them from the refers index also. I just feel like that, like you can solve the garbage collection problem outside of OCI specified behavior. We could also specify it, but I don't have that kind of time.
I also want to kind of take it a slightly different direction, which is that if we're saying that you can delete content by pushing a new refers response that has a bunch of content deleted from it, and the registry explicitly didn't support any kind of delete API, are we giving end users kind of a backdoor method to do a delete on content those registry operators may not have wanted to give access to that?
I would
or
say
even
that
maybe-
falls into what Jason just said, of that's out of scope for the definition here.
So
I would say it's the
let me phrase it differently.
registry considered that as unreferenced at that point. Yeah.
Let me phrase it differently, which is that what if someone explicitly did not have the delete right for a repository? They have access to push content, but they don't have access to delete content on that registry. Or are we, by doing this, giving them access to delete content de facto?
Up to the registry. I would say that falls under registry defined behavior around garbage collection, which is out of scope.
I mean, I'm not even saying that the registry would delete the manifest. I'm saying that because the manifest is no longer visible, it's effectively deleted to the user.
I mean,
there's
they
no
could
way
fetch
to
it by
affect that.
digest, but
Yeah.
They'd have to know the digest, and the whole point of the refers API was that you didn't know the digest.
I mean, that's a general problem today. If you push up a
Yeah.
image that is not referenced by anything, how are you going to know the digest?
Yeah, but I mean, registries
I
today
just
can
remember
implement
every
things
digest.
like, yeah, registries can implement immutable tags today if they wanted to, and say, hey, you can push the tag, but you can't overwrite the tag. They can implement stuff that says, hey, you can push a refer, but you can't delete any of the content that you pushed up there. Well, now we're saying, well, to implement this, you're going to have to push the refer's response, and therefore now we're giving them access to delete content that many registries have gone through a lot of effort to make sure you couldn't do in any other scenario.
Are you suggesting that registries may implement immutable refers?
No, I'm suggesting that when the refer gets pushed, that content is immutable, that they can't retract it. And that might be for security reasons. You might want to have an audit log and know that that went up there with that content at that time, and be able to go back and view that in the future.
Yeah, I'd say that's up to the registry to decide.
I think going back to the question that Brandon asked about why a registry would choose to implement implement only the fallback of forward progress, but not the full forward progress. I think I have the same question for clients. If I'm writing a client that pushes, signatures to a registry, I think I'm going to do, if it is full 1.1 compliant, then I would like to push that. That's the ideal way. And if I get any indication that it's not going as expected, I know 1.0 is there waiting for me, and I'll just push a tag and kind of hate it, but whatever. I'm not sure what the client benefit is of supporting this middle path, except for, I guess, and unless, even we're back to a chicken and egg, unless the registry they want to push to only supports the middle path.
I mean, it shouldn't matter for the client, isn't that the whole?
Well, the client implementer has to decide whether they want to handle each branch of the if statement in our deeply nested spec.
Let's take the scenario we have today, which is that there are clients out there already that are looking at the registry and saying, let me try to push this with the 1.1. They fall back to the fallback scenario. They're going to push something that has that tag value in there. They're not going to push to the new refer API because we haven't defined that in spec yet. Now a new client comes along in the future and does push to that new API. What does the registry do, and what do the clients see they're querying this when you have two different clients, one querying the fallback tag, one querying the refers API? How do those two not have two different versions of reality?
Is that a question for how does my proposal affect that, or more of a general question for refers?
If we were to accept the third path, how would that third path not create two sets of realities for clients that do know it and don't know it?
The third path there at least gives registries an easy way where they can treat those as the same exact object. It's, I said that once again, that's up to the registries to decide. Like you can
so
treat
would that be part of the spec where we say that registries, when they see someone push up one of those fallback tags, that they automatically treat it as a push to the refers?
I'm not sure there. I mean, you could, I wouldn't put that as part of the spec, but if you want to mention that, as we talked about in the implementation guidelines, that they could be treated as the same.
My fear is, since we already have clients out there pushing this content now with the fallback, that they don't upgrade overnight, just like registries don't upgrade overnight. And so we're going to have a scenario where people would be pushing content two different ways to the same registry.
But isn't that a concern? I mean, that's a general concern even without this change of I did fallback and then suddenly my registry turns on the /refers API, and now none of that subject data
that we
indexed.
Specifically put in the spec. That part we put in the spec have said that when the registry updates, they need to automatically include any content that was pushed with the fallback.
Yeah, and that in and of itself is a little bit of a tricky proposition to say to large registries that were not indexing that data, which, I mean, that comes down to the original must problem, which is as far as my understanding is implementation of distribution was trying to index this data so that they could serve that, and they were having trouble with the indexing. And even if refers wasn't turned on yet, just trying to build up that index was a challenge. But yeah, I think as to what you're saying in terms of if you were implementing if you were using the fallback and then you flipped on refers, then I think it's fair to say that the registry could use those manifests, and they could use that even regardless of like if they're auto-generating, they can fall back to if that manifest exists to use that as well. Like you could do that today.
Is not like committing you to the proposal you've outlined in the Slack, but if that proposal, more or less the bones of that proposal were accepted, would distribution implement it? Is that the version of refers that distribution would prefer to implement?
Yeah, that's what I'm pushing for. I mean, I'm in a weird middle state where I'm not a maintainer on distribution anymore. I mostly represent Containerd as a client, and I like the fallback approach from the Containerd perspective for, I think, ways I've mentioned before. But I've had discussions about trying to drop that subject requirement there and whether or not this solves that problem. In terms of
Yeah.
when and if it gets implemented, I need to talk to Milos and stuff about some of the folks there.
So I
specifically.
wonder if a path forward is distribution is 1.0 compliant today. Good. 1.1 comes out without your fallback changes, and distribution is not 1.1 compliant. But we start talking about a 1.2 that includes this third path. And if 1.2 is ever accepted, distribution is 1.0 compliant and 1.2 compliant, but at no time was ever 1.1 compliant because it was a may, or in 1.2, we can change it to you can either implement the refers endpoint A or refers endpoint B. That way, there is a path for distribution to upgrade or to be compliant with future versions of the spec. But it's not blocking all the other implementations that are already compliant with the RCs of the spec that we've debated endlessly since I was but a wee lad.
I mean, this goes back to the conversation we had before, which was, I think when we first talked about this was about transactions. And this is kind of the where at least I've ended up in terms of thinking about what transactions would look like. But yeah, I'm of the opinion that we should like the RCs should continue, the RCs should be shipped, and 1.1 should be complete with everything. But that's just my opinion.
I think I agree with Jason, though. If what we're doing right now won't break all the existing clients, I don't see any reason why we wouldn't be able to ship a 1.1 and then later a 1.2. Just because if everything we do with this new method is fully, falls back to whatever the fallback tag was, you can see clients doing that and automatically syncs that up, and there's no possibility of a split brain scenario. I think that we're in a safe situation. This could be added later.
I mean, I'm biased because I proposed it, but that feels like a compromise that gives everyone a path to success on a long enough timeline. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you're not opposed to the general idea of 1.1. You just want to include, Derek, you want to include this in 1.1. And I think it's probably just the idea of talking about another addition to the spec for the next 6 months ages me. So
yeah,
I kind of want to call for, I have no power here, first of all, but I kind of want to call for a vote and just get it over with and figure out how to proceed. I think you have some good ideas for how to get it even better, or get it so in a state where distribution specifically could implement it. But I don't think there's any reason to hold back on ECR and MCR and any other implementation that wants to from bragging about the work they've done on this spec and on this implementation.
And just kind of piggyback on that, there's work that I like to do with updating the tag API to get back more details on the tag response. There is work that we want to do for conditional request. And so clients can push content and know that the registry isn't going to overwrite things that they didn't detect. So there is new features that we'd like to see added. And so I think that there is no shortage of a desire to get a 1.2 out.
And there's features in 1.1 that are unrelated to refers. There's warning headers, there's OCI extensions, there's probably 2 or 3 others, clarifications in the wording and things. I think this has been another reason I just want 1.1 out, even if refers isn't part of it. Please don't do that. But there are other benefits to 1.1 that are being held up by continued debate and discussion on refers specifically. And like Brandon says, there's plenty of things I would also love to do for 1.2 and future shoulds that become musts, or musts that become shoulds, or future APIs that we implement. V2 of a tags API would be fantastic.
There are people that want an entirely new artifact manifest too. So,
well, they're crazy. No, I'm just kidding. So, yeah, I don't know. if Derek, if it was up for a vote today, if you must vote to accept and ratify 1.1 as it's written or not, what is your vote?
I mean, I'll go for another RC, but I think until we have some language there to review, I
Is
I don't want to do, I
haven't
don't want a final 1.1 yet, but that's me.
Yeah,
I'm just one vote, but
no, I know. I haven't for my own clarification, I haven't paid attention for the last couple of months because I've been too sane. Is there any material difference between RC5 and head today? Or those RC5 was relatively recently, right? Was there any big change
I
in
think
those?
there's a little bit that we missed in there. So there is a good
Okay.
reason to get another RC out. And I've got listed on there at least 3 things I'd like to get finished up and resolved and put into the spec before we cut the next RC. But we're close.
Okay. In that case, yeah, I mean, like let's do a weekly RC if we want. But I would like to at least be able to see a path towards a real 1.1 that real implementers out in the wild can start to actually talk about. And I say this completely selflessly. I'm not even one of those implementations that would like to talk about it. I'm also one of the fools waiting for it to get codified before I implement it. So, you know,
Somewhere way back in the Simver challenges we had when we cut the RC1, we decided we don't want to go past an RC9 just because of Simver sorting and the way we did our separator.
now I have 2 big reasons not to want to go past RC9. But yeah, I guess Derek, to push the point again, if what was at head became RC6 and then we waited the appropriate amount of time to
why do we keep jumping RCs? RC4.
Sorry, I forget what RC number we're on. RC 11.5. RC3 was last. Is that what it is? See, I have not been paying attention.
Okay,
yeah,
so RC7, got it.
RC7, RC Cola. If what is at head became the next RC and then became up for a vote for 1.1, like what is your vote? I understand you're only one vote, but each vote matters while half of the maintainers are MIA.
Yeah, so I mean, my vote stays I think we can do it. I think we can do an RC, and I want a path forward. And I don't think we have. I guess the thing is, yeah, we just started discussing what this looks like, so we don't know what the impact on the change is, or what the impact on the spec will actually look like. I wanted to get agreement before I went in and did a bunch of changing of the spec. And if it's like, hey, this is this should be 1.2, then we can do that. But
I think that's
I don't
kind
want
of
to
where
rush.
I'm at. Yeah, I think your proposed change is a reasonable topic for a 1.2. Feel free, other folks, to disagree with me. I have, again, no power here. I'd love to hear, if possible, from any of the implementers that have already implemented RC 7.5 or whatever it is. Do you think that it would be an embarrassment and a work to, if that became 1.1? Like I feel like everyone's sort of, like I said, kind of narrowing in on the thing we all agree on. If we can kick 1.2 down the road, then we can cut it and be good. Begin the month-long process of cutting it and being good.
What I would want to see from the proposal, which you work on, Derek, from the client side, just because I know there are multiple clients that have already started implementing this, is that it fully works with everybody who's doing the fallback. And so as long as what you're saying is, hey, not all registries is going to implement the new refers API, we've got this third way, but if a client jumps all the way back to the original fallback, it's still going to work with whatever you're suggesting. I think as long as we have the language in the spec of whatever the proposal is, I think we'll be in a good place.
Sounds good.
Cool. So we have 3 other issues sitting out there. if we can get those 3 done, I think we're in a place we can start talking about cutting a new release candidate. And I would say while we're doing those in parallel, Derek, feel free to put together a pull request and to say, here's an idea, whether it makes into 1.1 or not. It's at least out there for us to talk about. And the man of the hour is not here again. I keep wanting to pick on Mike Brown, but he is not here again to talk about the other 3 issues that I got sitting out in the queue.
Let's ask Michael Brown.
He tried to sub in for him last week, and I
Do your
felt
best
too bad
impression.
for him. I felt far too bad making him sub in for Mike Brown. It's not a fun position.
Does
to
he
be
have a
in, I don't
cowboy
think.
hat? Wait. Josh has a cowboy hat. Maybe he can sub in.
There we go.
Josh, can you hand that to Michael?
Yes,
Thank you.
Michael Brown approved.
Do you want to overnight that cowboy hat and we can just reconvene tomorrow?
Yeah.
There we go.
No, I don't. I don't
Um,
want to reconvene. I just want to.
Just ship
Are
it.
you saying you've got a
approve.
limit of how much OCI in a week you can do?
I think that I'd be lying if that wasn't true.
I'm already over by 45 minutes. So
Oh boy. So the 3 issues that I've got there for Mike Brown to talk about. If other people in here want to chime in on that, we can also do that, which is the support refers to a missing manifest. Actually, this might be a good one for us to talk about, which is we had some language in the spec that was a little bit funny. This is 491 I'm talking about. We had some language in there that was specifically saying, I got to scroll down the bottom so I can read it right here, that if you pushed a manifest up to the registry that had a subject field and that subject didn't exist, that there was an extra middle intermediate state that a registry could be in where it could not give you back that response. It could accept the manifest, but it could not give back the response in there. And where I'm going with this one is I want to take out that intermediate state. Either the registry accepts it or we're going back to the fallback scenario. And if it accepts it and says everything's good, you got the refers response, that the client can assume that if they query the refers response, that they will see the manifest that they pushed up there listed in there. Are there any concerns by removing that intermediate state and just saying it's there or not there? Did I explain that one too poorly for anyone to possibly have a hope of understanding it?
I was thinking about cats. Can you try again?
Let me throw it up on the big screen. Actually, a little screen. 1 second. Just so we have the text we can all read and share along together. It's more fun as a group. I mean, I always think about cats, so I have no problem at all thinking about that. All right, window reorganizing, and the text we're taking out is these couple lines here, which basically said that there is an intermediate state where you push your signature, the image that you're signing doesn't exist on the registry yet. We had this intermediate state where the registry could accept it, tell you that it's got the refers API, you'll get this back, but that it had this state where until you push the image, it could give you back an empty refers response. You query the refers, it just says there's nothing referring to this because the image hadn't been pushed yet. And so this is just taking it out. Either you accept it and you give the refers response and you say, here's all the signed stuff for that image, whether or not the image is there, or you accept the manifest, but you don't tell that you got the refers response, and then you fall back to all the stuff we've been talking about earlier today, where you push the fallback tag, or we do the put to the refers API, something like that. Is anybody attached to this old language? That might be a better way of asking it.
I think this is clearer without it.
Yeah. One
Yeah,
last intermediate
agreed.
scenario is what I was going for. One less intermediate scenario. Cool. So if that one looks good to folks, feel free to put reviews on that PR. Again, that was 491. The other one, 463, we had a efficiency request, which is that if you query the registry and it did not have any refers for a manifest that you pulled down, it could give you a header that just says, hey, I got nothing on the refers API, don't even bother querying it. Just says OCI refers absent. And it's a may, it is not a must. It is a may in there. So if a registry wants to do that efficiency, they can. If they don't, no big deal. The client that wants refers will go off and query the refers API, get back nothing, and go about its day. And I think the debate in here was whether or not we should also have a present, and there's a lot of back and forth as to why that doesn't make sense for this scenario and other alternatives that we are considering that would make more sense.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I agree with having the
Alright.
header. I think my other suggestion was, yeah, the possibility of being able to link to the digest of the referrer's response, so that the you don't have to do another trusted operation. You can get everything from the head request to the tag.
Yeah, the
But-
fact that we said absent here as a fixed string, I think means we can do something like that as an additional PR on top of this.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it could be that, or it could be or we could use another header. I mean, yeah, we're not bound to put everything in one single header as well.
Yeah.
Because I know this, like, yeah, I think we had the discussion, Brandon, we're talking about sometimes we get a digest, but we actually want a descriptor, and just like we have like the Docker digest or whatever that we use, but sometimes it's like, well, we're creating a descriptor out of the size field, the digest field now, and the content type field in order to kind of have a root object to start a pull from. But in some cases, yeah, I don't think we want to try to like throw everything in there. So it could make sense to put them in separate headers as well. But I think having this header though is fine. Is a worthwhile optimization.
Should we also have clients provide a header indicating that they want this information? From a client efficiency perspective, this is great. From a registry efficiency perspective, it adds, overhead to what is generally a really, really cheap operation. And so if you're a client just pulling something and you don't care about refers, maybe you don't want to pay the 5 milliseconds of additional latency to generate this header. I don't know. Maybe this is too complicated.
Isn't that why it's the negative case here? Like if a registry doesn't return anything, then it just tells the client you need to go look for it yourself.
Right. Well, I guess if I were implementing this, I would maybe just not. It's a balancing act of, am I going to do extra work for a client that might throw it away? Or am I going to do extra work to prevent a client from doing more work later? And if we had a positive signal from the client that's like, hey, if you tell me that there's no referrers, then I won't send you an additional HTTP request. And that is a positive signal to the registry. It's like, oh, it would actually be worth doing the additional work to check to see that there are no referrers. This might be too much of like a micro optimization, but
Yeah, I mean, this is my biggest concern is this is one of the most critical operations that we support as a registry, and I would be very against adding non-critical operations on that path. I think I've said this on on the issue, and Brandon said it's optional, but I don't know, just in general from a registry point of view, like I would never do this. So for that reason, I'm not interested in merging this, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't get in.
Would
Again,
having
I'm very comfortable knowing that there are registries that won't ever implement this, at least in any near future. But just knowing that there is an option for them in the future if they do see a lot of usage of refers and they feel like this could reduce some of their load, they've got the ability to add it when they want to.
If it's a May, you could also implement it on a per request basis if you think it's worth doing. Like during load, turn it off or whatever. It has different complexity, but also an option if it's a May.
I suppose we could get really clever and like track whether a client has sent a refers request previously and is crawling a graph, but I don't know.
You might start fingerprinting the clients, looking at the user agent on it and saying, hey, this is the user agent that commonly does this. Let's go through the extra effort for that one user.
In that case, I feel like I want an affirmative, clear. I am looking for refers header instead of heuristic. Stochastically, I think your user agent Firefox 123 looks like a thing that would care about this.
Are you saying people have done user agent heuristics have ever run into problems in the past?
It works every time. Either way, I'm comfortable with it if it's a May. Like, I think that we don't have to do it, and maybe no one will do it.
Yeah. All right. The only other thing in here is the pagination. John, I think I threw a bunch of comments in there for you. And I think you ran away from this after last week's meeting.
Would you believe I was out of town?
I would believe that. I would feel bad that you weren't in my town, but I would believe it.
Let me look. Fine, I'll carry my PR forward. Requested changes.
That's the only stuff I've got. I threw a bunch of comments in there, just different things I was looking at. Making sure the goal here is we don't break the existing clients, or we minimize the breakage of existing clients. And that's all I got, which is good because we're at the end of the meeting.
I will reply.
Thank you, as always, Brandon, for shepherding us toward the future, and everyone else for showing up and being cool.
Thanks to all the people that showed up here, didn't say anything, and still want to strangle us all in the process.
Thank you for not strangling us.
But they were so polite. Thanks all. Have a great week.
Bye.